Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Algeria's army chief points to a constitutional article that could sideline President Bouteflika by declaring him unfit. But anti-regime protesters say may want more than just the ailing leader's exit. Also, the head of the United Nations calls the deadly cyclone that devastated parts of southeastern Africa last week an uncommonly fierce and prolonged storm that rang yet another alarm about climate change. Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe are still struggling with the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. And a diversity charter is drawn up at the CEO Africa Forum in Kigali in a bid to help female business leaders on the continent break through the glass ceiling. Our team tells us more. But first, after more than a month of protests against the regime of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, Algeria's army chief announced on television on Tuesday that he thinks the 82-year-old should be declared unfit to rule. Now, it's a surprise, as General Ahmed Gaid Salah is a Bouteflika loyalist. Salah's called for the triggering of a constitutional article to sideline the president. Now, Bouteflika's led for 20 years, but rarely been seen in public since having a stroke in 2013. If Salah's request receives enough backing from Parliament, constitutional procedure would put the Senate president in charge until new elections. But protesters have run out of patience not only with Bouteflika, but also with his entire entourage, and want more than just his removal. Dr. Michael Willis specialises in Algerian politics and joins us now from Oxford University's St. Anthony's College. Michael, thanks for speaking to us. Now, isn't General Gaid Salah an ally of Bouteflika? Why would he do this?
Yes, he is. He's been a long-time ally of the president and was appointed by him over 10 years ago. But I think what you're seeing now is Algeria's political leadership trying to make concessions in the face of these mass demonstrations for the removal of the regime, in the hope that by saying that the president should be removed for medical reasons, triggering the constitutional requirements for somebody to be fit to hold the office, to remove him. But in fact, the president has been physically incapable of being president really since he had the stroke 6 years ago. So I think it's really trying to buy time and hoping that the protests somehow see this as a meaningful concession and begin to ease off. But I don't think that's going to happen.
So regardless of that, is Parliament likely to push ahead with declaring Bouteflika unfit with this, even if protesters aren't placated?
I think they probably will. They're hoping that by triggering this element in the constitution and saying that he's no longer fit to run, and then introducing, as you said, to have an interim president and then presidential elections, that they'll try and think that that will somehow take the wind out of the demonstrations. But I don't think it will.
So what do protesters want to see?
They want to see the whole regime cleared out. What they're concerned about is that they'll just remove Bouteflika, who, again, has not really been in a fit state to run things for the last 6 years. And their concern is that they will just move people around, rearrange the furniture, bring in another person close to the existing political leadership, and return to business as usual as quickly as possible. And that's something they're very against. And certainly the indications are from Algeria that that has not been accepted, and we'll like to see the demonstrations are going to continue, and there'll be another mass, huge-scale demonstration across the country on Friday.
Thanks very much, Dr. Michael Willis there, joining us from St. Anthony's College in the UK. Now, the head of the United Nations has pointed to the devastation that Cyclone Idai has caused in southern Africa as further evidence of the dangers posed by climate change. Last week's storms caused massive flooding across Mozambique and also hit Zimbabwe and Malawi hard. Over 761 people have been killed across the region. More bodies, though, are being found as the waters recede. Our team in Mozambique met some of those fleeing the aftermath of the disaster in the valley of Pongwe.
In Sofala province, there's no electricity. Roads and fields are still flooded. These people have been trying to flee this disaster area for days. Leaving on foot is their only choice. Marcos, who has been working on a construction site in Buzi, took the opportunity to hit the road as soon as the water started receding. He walked for 50 kilometers.
This is the situation. Everybody's coming on the food from this side. So everybody's crying for food. There is no food. Even we are seeing a helicopter passing on the top. But no one is, we tried to make some signal, but no one is saying. So we survived.
He clings to this plastic bag that protects all his important documents from the rain.
This is my life. So that's why I'm carrying like a baby, you know. But most of the people, they lost everything.
Everybody has a story to tell. It's impossible to say how many people have died as a result of the cyclone. The Buzi area has more than 200,000 inhabitants, and people here say the 447 dead announced by the government does not include those in Buzi.
People over there are laying fishing nets, and those nets are catching dead bodies. There are dead bodies over on that side too.
As the sun comes out again, they start rebuilding with the little they still have left.
It is a habit. Whenever it is raining, sometimes it happens. Anyhow, they are trying to push day by day. And we are from far off, afraid about that water flowing. And now I'm happy because I'm going out. So I'm food-filled, at least.
As for Marcos, he is going home to the Zambezi province, 700 kilometers from here.
Report by our team in Mozambique. Now, at least 179 people have died in Zimbabwe. 80% of maize crops there have been wiped out, at least in the worst affected areas in the country. But some victims are claiming that politics is already at play and that they're being sidelined when it comes to the distribution of food aid because they're supporters of the opposition MDC party. Ryan Truscott joins us now with more from Zimbabwe. Ryan, how much do you think there is to these claims of partisan food aid distribution?
Well, I spoke to one eyewitness who said yesterday he was at a depot for relief aid at Silverstream near Chimanimani town, which is one of the worst hit areas, and he claims to have witnessed ruling party trucks arrive and start loading things like cooking oil and sugar. And this eyewitness said that it looked like it was being taken for resale rather than for distribution. But he says that the army did put a stop to it and impounded some of the vehicles. And then today, a private newspaper, Newsday, carried a report in which they interviewed some Chimanimani villagers saying that they had been denied food aid because of their perceived links to the opposition MDC. Look, distribution of food aid to loyalists is something that the ruling party has been accused of in the past, but ZANU-PF may defend itself and say that its vehicles were picking up goods to take to people in need. But the Social Welfare Minister, July Moyo, has today said that no assistance should be taken to affected areas in political party vehicles.
So what are aid groups on the ground saying?
Well, I spoke to the coordinator of one independent charity, and she told me that they've been getting numerous calls from people saying that they've been sidelined or they aren't getting aid. Obviously, it's a matter for concern, but at the same time, she did say that her group had struck up a very good working relationship with local administrators, with the Air Force, with government officials. In fact, she said that the local administrator had asked her group to get aid packages to some of these areas where people are saying that they have been sidelined. Also, the delay in distributing aid may be bureaucratic in some cases rather than political. I mean, everything has to be recorded. Each time a helicopter drops aid, it has to be signed for in front of a government official. And then, of course, some areas do still remain cut off because 95% of roads in these areas have been severely damaged.
And how bad are the food shortages in the worst hit areas?
Well, the government said it's done an initial assessment in Chimanimani and Chipinge, which are the two worst affected districts, and 80% of the staple maize crop has been destroyed, either buried in landslides or inundated by floodwaters. The UN says that nearly 250,000 people in these two districts alone require urgent food aid. And with these delays in food aid distribution, we're getting local reports of people in Chimanimani, for instance, surviving just on fruit, on guavas and green bananas, which have to be boiled to make them soft. But it's not just the hunger that charity groups are dealing with. I was speaking to one aid worker who told me that they're going to be setting up centers for trauma counseling because of the terrible tragedies and hardships that people have been through since that storm struck 12 days ago.
Thanks very much. Ryan Truscott there for us in Zimbabwe. Now, Comoros President Azali Assoumani's been re-elected. He first took office in 2016 and had been expected to win by a landslide. Even before results were announced on Tuesday, the opposition had claimed that last weekend's elections had been rigged. Observers from the African Union have also said that the process was riddled with irregularities and lacked credibility. Now, entrepreneurs from across the continent headed to Kigali this week for a two-day CEO Africa Forum. Now, that wrapped up on Tuesday, but not before gender parity becoming one of the top issues of the meeting. With African women almost never breaking through the glass ceiling into top management, that was an issue that was closely looked at. Our team sent us this report.
1 in 5 of the people attending the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali in Rwanda is female. That is an overrepresentation in terms of the number of women in top management positions as a whole in Africa, where just 5% of women are CEOs. The goal in Kigali is to start changing that by developing a diversity charter.
We've brought together 60 African business leaders, 40 women and 20 men, representing all parts of the continent and from a range of fields, and put them in a room together for 2 hours to set out a charter which will serve as a guideline for good practices.
Themes in the Women in Business Initiative discussions include raising awareness of the gender issue to business owners, devising concrete action plans, recruiting and training talented women, and looking at gender issues in product development and in target setting.
Not so much quoted. So setting yourself ambitious targets, measuring them, managing the performance around those targets, and making sure that you continuously focus on meeting them and exceeding them.
Don't think about performance or track record. Look at potential and promote women into those leadership positions because of their potential.
The goal ultimately is parity, 50-50 in terms of top management positions. The Diversity Charter will be presented to companies across Africa to be signed and implemented.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Please do so again if you can. Take care.